Chandra Levy had a secret. The 24-year-old Washington, D.C. intern spent the morning searching the web. And if you knew what to look for, her secret was pretty clear. At 11:33, she searched for information about the Pierce Klingel mansion in Rock Creek Park. Her final search about Alsace-Lorraine, France, came just before 1 p.m. that day. Then, she vanished. Her parents reported her missing on May 6th. Her internship had ended. She was set to head home to California for her graduation ceremony from USC later that month. DC police searched her apartment, but they found no signs that anything was wrong. Chandra's parents were still paying the phone bill, so her father looked into it. He saw one number popping up over and over again. He made a phone call.
You've reached the office of Representative Condit. Please leave a message after the tone.
The next day, Levy's father told police that secret she'd been hiding. She was having an affair with a politician, United States Congressman Gary Condit. From very early on, this police investigation was very poorly done. It took the police over a month to find that search history. The first attempt corrupted the data, so they had to rebuild the database from scratch. The police never got the surveillance footage from Chandra's apartment building. By the time they thought of it, it had been recorded over. It could have showed whether she had left alone or with somebody else or possibly been followed. The night she disappeared, there'd been a 911 call from her apartment building, reporting a woman screaming. Police couldn't find where it had come from. In fact, Chandra had practically led investigators to where she was. That search history had all the clues they needed. They held candlelight vigils. There was constant news coverage, all to bring Chandra back home. Plenty of searches, though they still didn't know where to look. The focus was on Gary Condit. Condit was 53. He was the U.S. representative for the district Chandra called home back in California. He was a pretty good-looking guy, too, and Chandra had a little bit of a thing for older guys. For a young woman like her to be attracted to him, it was understandable. The press didn't dig into the story beyond the lurid details of a married man having an affair with a young intern. And Condit gave them plenty of reasons to concentrate on him. He repeatedly denied having an affair with Chandra when he bothered answering questions at all, and those denials made the press pursue him even harder. One columnist suggested Condit had hired somebody he met at an embassy orgy to kill her. Another said Condit had hired the Hells Angels to do the job. Condit denied everything. He said he barely knew Chandra. The Levy family was in disbelief. Chandra had called his office hundreds of times. They learned through Chandra's aunt, Linda Zamsky, that Chandra had even confided in her about the affair. Zamsky gave them specific details. Condit had spent several weekends at Chandra's apartment. He'd given her gifts. He denied it, but investigators later found his semen on her underwear in the laundry hamper of her apartment. Zamsky said Chandra had dreamed of the two getting married, of starting a family. Zamsky also said there was a darker side. Condit was secretive, controlling. He wouldn't allow Chandra to meet with him while she was carrying her identification. Just before she went missing, Chandra had called her aunt and left a message saying that she had big news. And despite all of that, and despite the fact that he had left 2 messages on her answering machine the day she disappeared, before she was even reported missing, he still said he barely knew her. Behind closed doors, Condit didn't admit to much more than he did in public. Police felt like he was stonewalling them. He was a married man, and he knew this kind of scandal could end his career and possibly his marriage. A lot of people thought he might even run for president someday. He had an alibi. He had met with the vice president during the morning, and then he was with his wife in the afternoon. All in all, Gary Condit may have been innocent, but he sure wasn't acting like it. Condit refused a lie detector test. Then he agreed to a test administered by a privately hired examiner. He did pass the test, and now it was time to go on the offensive. He did an interview with Connie Chung. It was a complete disaster.
Did you kill Chandra Levy?
I did not.
When Mrs. Levy called you and said that her daughter was missing, and she asked you point blank, she says, at a critical time in the investigation, as to whether or not you had an affair with her daughter, you answered, according to her, matter-of-factly, no.
People started to suspect him even more. A poll taken that summer showed 44% of Americans thought he had killed her. 51% said he was at least acting like he had. Suspicions were flying, rumors too. The press was all over him. They were hounding him. It was relentless. The pressure was mounting, and there was absolutely nothing that could make it stop. And just like that, the story was mostly forgotten. About a year later, a man walking his dog in Rock Creek Park discovered something horrifying.
He was parked. I was walking my dog, and I came across a human skull.
The skeletal remains of a young woman. The area was familiar to police. They had searched within 100 yards of that location where this body was found, but because of miscommunication, they searched near roads and not near the jogging trails that cut through the park. As investigators searched, they found quite a bit of evidence. A Walkman, shoes, women's clothing, the legs of her tights were tied in knots, lipstick. The autopsy showed a broken hyoid bone, a possible sign of strangulation, but it was impossible to tell if that was really the cause of death, though they did have enough to open a murder investigation. Authorities also confirmed the worst to the Levy family. They had found Chandra. Investigators thought Chandra had been attacked while jogging in the park, dragged into the woods, and murdered, but there were problems with that theory. It's true, she had canceled her gym membership just that week, but when they spoke to the managers of the gym, they said that Chandra never actually worked out on a treadmill or did any cardio at all. So maybe she did her cardio on those Rock Creek jogging trails. But her friend said that she rarely went jogging and she never went alone for fear of being attacked. None of it made sense, and the investigation stalled. A year after her body was found, Chandra Levy was laid to rest near her hometown of Modesto, California. A few dozen friends and family were there. They released a dozen white doves. Her killer was still out there. Some believed they already knew who he was. Back in September of 2001, police and federal prosecutors had talked to an informant who claimed he knew what happened to Chandra. He said that 20-year-old Ingmar Guandike, a man who was already in jail for attacking joggers in Rock Creek Park, had killed her. The informant said that Guandike had admitted it. Guandike's landlady said he didn't leave for work the day Chandra went missing. The landlady said he had scratches, bruises on his face, and he had admitted to the 2 other attacks in Rock Creek Park just after Chandra's disappearance. Despite that, investigators considered him a person of interest, but not a true suspect. Guandike said he was innocent. The informant failed a lie detector test, and Guandike's test was inconclusive. But ultimately, his answers were found to be not deceptive. Guandike was sentenced to 10 years for the other attacks in Rock Creek Park, and that's where the case sat until 2008. There was a new chief of police. The Washington Post had continued pursuing the case, making a pretty compelling argument that Guandike had committed the crime. Investigators searched Guandike's prison cell and found something that would change their investigation completely. It was a photograph of Chandra Levy. He'd torn it from a magazine, and he had a fresh new prison tattoo, the face of a woman who looked a lot like Chandra. Investigators began interviewing any prisoner who had had contact with Guandike. One man, Armando Morales, said Guandike had admitted to the murder. Morales said Guandike had seen Levy jogging through Rock Creek Park. Guandike tried to rob her, and she fought back. By the time he dragged her into the bushes, she was unconscious, and he left her for dead. He said he was a changed man. He said he had never been an informant for the police before, but this epiphany made him decide to finally do the right thing. And none of that was true. But none of it mattered. Police issued an arrest warrant for Guandike, and he was brought back to Washington, D.C. He was charged with multiple crimes, including murder. Guandike was convicted of all charges. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Police felt confident the case was closed, that they had gotten their man. In 2016, a woman named Babs Prowler met Armando Morales. Over a few days' time, they developed a friendship. Morales told her his life story. He told her that he was a former gang member and that he had spent some time in prison. Morales ended up threatening Prowler's husband, so Prowler began recording their conversations. Morales said that he was a witness in Chandra's murder trial. He eventually admitted that he had made the entire thing up, that Guandike had never confessed. And he had also said that he wasn't going to benefit from his testimony, but he was. In fact, he was released years early after Guandike had been convicted. Prowler gave these recordings to the investigators. They overturned the original conviction, and a new trial was considered, but ultimately the charges were dropped for a lack of evidence. Many people still believe Ingmar Guandike committed the murder, and it's possible that he did kill Chandra Levy. Rumors have swirled that Chandra killed herself, that it was a serial killer, that Gary Condit did it, or at least hired somebody to do it, or that Condit's wife had committed the crime. Condit has repeatedly said they weren't having an affair, but they were. He denies it to this day. Why is he lying? What's the benefit? His political career is over. Unfortunately, Chandra's friends and her family will likely never know who killed her. Ingmar Guandike completed his original 10-year sentence for the Rock Creek Park attacks and was deported in May of 2017. Armando Morales served his time for selling meth and was released. Gary Condit moved to Arizona and opened a Baskin-Robbins ice cream shop, which has since closed. It's hard to say whether this case can ever be solved, but I still keep coming back to one thing. Who brings lipstick when they go jogging? Who goes jogging when they never did cardio in the gym? Was she there to meet somebody? And what was this big news that she was going to share with her aunt? Unfortunately, we may never know the answers. If you have any information about this case, please contact the FBI.